Tonight, a local couple is recounting the terror triggered by a doctor at Seattle Children's Hospital whose wrongful diagnosis of child abuse took their baby away from them.
Fox 14's A.G. Janival says Dr. Elena Feldman's findings were accepted by the Department of Children, Youth and Families, but rejected by other doctors and the courts.
The judge in Grace and Sam Wilkinson's case ruled that Dcyf deliberately refused to see Sam for who he is, a loving father and husband. Sam Wilkinson will always remember how he felt when he saw Sequoia for the first time after growing up adopted, never knowing his birth parents.
That was such a surreal moment for me because it was the very first moment that I laid eyes on my own blood.
And Sam can't forget that day, 7 months later, when a doctor took her from him and how he felt then.
I'm a person that believes that through most circumstances, life goes on. But the thought of not having my daughter doesn't really feel like life would go on.
Sam and his wife, Grace, lost custody of their daughter by being good parents. February 25th, they rushed Sequoia to an urgent care. When they saw she was holding her arm funny, they ordered an x-ray. It showed Sequoia actually had a fracture, and the family should go immediately to Seattle Children's Hospital because she needed surgery. But at Children's, everything changed.
We felt like criminals from the get-go just because of the nature of a 7-month-old having a fracture. It's not common. You could just tell that the whole dynamic changed.
The injury, because it was uncommon, was treated as evidence. One or both parents were responsible. It was a medical certainty.
That's really what it is that it was a diagnosis of child abuse. Not just an accusation. They diagnosed our daughter with child abuse. I didn't know what the SCAN team was until we got an attorney.
SCAN stands for Safe Child and Adolescent Network. It's a team of pediatricians under contract with Washington's Department of Children, Youth, and Families who have special training to decide whether a child's injury is from abuse or neglect. The SCAN pediatrician handling Sequoia's case was Dr. Elena Feldman. And in her expert opinion, the x-rays showed at least 3 more broken bones besides Sequoia's elbow.
The doctor on the SCAN team, Elena Feldman, stated that these injuries were better understood as like child abuse injuries.
The situation felt hopeless, but Sam and Grace weren't helpless.
When we heard Elena Feldman, the name for the doctor, they decided they wanted to look her up.
It was there that we found your story on Casey.
Ready, set.
In February, we brought you the story of Casey Sigmund and her baby boy Kane. Like the Wilkinsons, Casey had brought her son to Seattle Children's Hospital. And like the Wilkinsons, she was blindsided by the SCAN team's determination that Kane had a sure sign of abuse. Even the doctor who made the diagnosis was the same, Dr. Elena Feldman. The judge ruled Dr. Feldman had made a mistake. There were no signs of abuse or neglect, and Casey and Kane were reunited. Buoyed by Casey's story, Sam and Grace reached out to her for any advice she could give to turn their situation around.
And the next day, my mom got a message back, and Casey's like, you guys need to hire a lawyer.
Attorney Elena Treball was fresh from winning a child custody battle against Dcyf when Sam and Grace hired her. Treball's first move was clear.
I wanted to ensure that we had a second opinion, time to figure out what exactly happened to Sequoia.
If Dcyf had SCAN, the Wilkinsons had Dr. Naran Alajba.
You have a child abuse team, so you need a child abuse defense team.
Dr. Alajba is a practicing pediatrician with more than 2 decades of experience. She's also an instructor on staff at Seattle Children's Hospital, and for the past several years, she's been brought in to consult on alleged child abuse cases. After reviewing Sequoia's case, 3 things became clear. 1, neither Sam nor Grace hurt Sequoia.
2 weeks after the original person says there's a break, there should be a bright white thing happening here.
I don't see anything.
No, of course not. Here, same thing. Do you see anything? No, it all looks good.
We shared what we had found, which was that we believe Sequoia has marks of poor bone formation, which is a relatively common condition for newborn babies.
2, Dr. Feldman's diagnosis was done sight unseen.
We've learned not only through testimony, but also through, the SCAN team's own records, that they do not believe it is medically necessary to personally examine the patient prior to making their diagnoses.
And 3, the social workers back at the hospital had already decided who was to blame.
They asked me how Sam was in the house and his behavior and how he treated Sequoia and I. And so I could connect the dots of like, okay, now they're trying to pin this on Sam.
Misread x-rays, misjudged character that led to a mistaken diagnosis of abuse. But would the court agree? At the Wilkinson's custody hearing, Judge Nicole Gaines Phelps reached the same conclusion. And she found the scan team made its decisions based on conscious and unconscious bias towards people that come from minority communities, particularly Black and brown communities.
They had no problem diagnosing child abuse, but then when it came time to explain why they made that diagnosis, they couldn't show up.
For a judge to use their position to call out and just name that it was racial bias. I was sitting next to him and we both just took a deep breath in that moment and just cried.
I reached out to officials from both Seattle Children's Hospital and Dcyf for on-camera interviews regarding this story. An official from Dcyf told me they cannot comment on cases. Seattle Children's did not answer a request for an interview. Reporting in the studio, AJ Janavel, Fox 13 News.